Hi everyone, it's Katrina. Number 10. The Giants of Sardinia. A new excavation at one of the most mysterious burial grounds in the world has turned up some extraordinarily strange statues. The location for the excavation was the Necropolis of Mare in Sardinia. It was here where researchers found 7-foot-tall statues that were completely expressionless and mysterious. The faces of the giant sculptures are downright eerie. They have eyes set deep in the back of their heads, huge blocky noses, and yet somehow they look weary at the same time. But despite being in such great shape, these statues are almost 3,000 years old, carved sometime around 850 BC. Dario Franceschini, the Minister of Culture in Italy, called the discovery exceptional. These weren't the only statues found either. They were only the most recent. Another pair of similar statues were found in 2014. And the entire necropolis is populated by huge, stoic men made from stone. Monte Brama itself was only found in 1974 by local farmers. They were digging in the fields when one of them struck the top of a stone head. After several years of digging, the field turned into one of the most important archaeological sites in Italy. It's here where historians have been piecing together the ancient history of Sardinia and its archaic people. At first, archaeologists thought they were looking at a Carthaginian settlement from 500 BC. But the people who lived here were much older, stemming from a race of islanders who moved to Sardinia around the 18th century BC. This was the mysterious Nuragic civilization, who have since been mostly forgotten by history. The Nuragic people built megaliths across the entire island that looked like solitary towers where a wizard might live. There are still over 6,000 of these solitary towers spread throughout Sardinia, and likely many more existed before and have been destroyed. These statues of Sardinia are also shocking because they look so strange and are extremely baffling. Nobody knows what the huge statues were built for, although many have suggested they were meant to be warriors. Top archaeologists believe they were the ancestral watchers of the necropolis, built at the burial site to watch over the souls of the dead. And now for number 9. But first, I want to give a big shout out to Jared King and Southern Sasquatch. Thanks so much for watching and supporting Origins Explained. If you are new here, be sure to subscribe and let us know what videos you'd like to see in the comments below. Number 9. Dinos in the Dark. It turns out that Steven Spielberg got at least one thing right with his movie Jurassic Park. Dinosaur enthusiasts will know most of his depictions of the prehistoric beasts were blatantly and purposely false. Dinosaurs didn't look as much like lizards as they did like giant, hairy chickens. But the one thing Jurassic Park got right was that velociraptors hunted at night. A new study on the eyes of fossilized animals has shown that a lot of dinosaurs, not just the predatory ones, preferred the nighttime hours. For the longest time, it was generally believed, according to geologist Ryosuke Motani from the University of California, that dinosaurs were active during the daytime and prehistoric mammals preferred the night. However, none of that is true. Scientists broke down dinosaur habits by looking at their fossilized eyeballs. Dinosaurs, lizards, and birds have very similar eyes. One of their features of their eyeballs is a bony ring known as a scleral ring. Mammals don't have it, and neither do crocodiles, but dinos and birds do. By measuring the inner and outer dimensions of that ring, and looking at the eye socket itself, scientists were able to mark the difference between nocturnal animals and diurnal animals who were active during the day. When it comes to diurnal animals, they have a small opening in the middle of their scleral ring, but nocturnal animals have a much bigger opening. This single feature is enough to tell which animals were around at night and which had an early bedtime. Scientists, now knowing what to look for in the eyeball, turned to dinosaur fossils. They looked at plant eaters, flying reptiles, and our favorite carnivores, and they were shocked to see that the larger herbivore dinosaurs were functional throughout both the day and night. They likely never stopped eating, only taking short breaks during the hottest hours of the day. Then they saw that carnivores, especially velociraptors, were strictly night hunters. All the small carnivorous dinosaurs preferred hunting when the sun went down. Unfortunately, since there are no fossilized eyes from the T-Rex, scientists can't say anything for sure about the giant-sized predators. whether they followed the same trend as velociraptors or not. Number 8. The Vesuvius Scrolls. There once stood a lavish villa in the city of Herculaneum 2,000 years ago, a splendid home which overlooked the beautiful Bay of Naples. The Romans who lived here had a fantastic view of the shimmering ocean, and judging by the size of their house, lived a life of ease. This was a massive estate with its own impressive library, stocked with the most important texts of the day. A variety of scrolls written by the greatest philosophers of history were kept inside this library, including a series of volumes written by Philodemus, who was one of poet Virgil's instructors. Unfortunately for the people who lived here, destruction came in the year 79 AD. Herculaneum, much like its sister city of Pompeii, stood in the shadow of Mount Vesuvius. When the volcano erupted and buried Pompeii in volcanic ash, it did the same to Herculaneum. Clouds of smoke and ash entombed the city, including the fantastic villa with its extensive library. In 1752, excavations revealed the residence and its impressive collection of literature. Diggers found several bundles of scrolls that were carbonized by the unbelievable heat of the volcano's fury. These scrolls were perfectly preserved, but hardly legible. They had essentially turned into volcanic rock. And the home itself was named the Villa of the Papyri. Since the 18th century, archaeologists have recovered 1,800 scrolls from the villa, but they have been a nightmare to try and read. It was only recently that archaeologists acquired the proper technology to look at these ancient pieces of writing. 200 years later, and these stubby chunks of carbonized scrolls are now being deciphered. Archaeologists have found a way to use X-rays to read the ancient writing. Roger McFarlane, a researcher from Brigham Young University in Utah, says just one chapter or one paragraph of any scroll is a huge breakthrough. So far, archaeologists have been able to unwrap a handful of texts written by Philodemus. He was a scholar and philosopher in Greece during the 3rd century BC. Historians have always known about him but have never had a chance to really understand his prose because most of his work was lost. But by looking at these scrolls using X-rays, archaeologists are seeing his bizarre school of thought firsthand. The philosopher taught that physical pleasure was the main goal of life, and that humans shouldn't fear the afterlife, but live a modest and pleasurable existence. There is still a lot of work that needs to be done, but modern scholars believe these scrolls may have been part of his personal collection. They might have come straight from Philodemus himself, or were at least copies made in the 1st century AD. Learning the exact origins of the 1,800 scrolls is likely going to take years, but in the end, it will all be worth it. Number 7. The Mirror Universe. Scientists have made a new discovery suggesting that there is a mirror universe on the other side of our own universe. A recent scientific study claims there could be a universe extending backwards in time. The thought is that our universe is the mirror image of a polar opposite universe that stretches on backwards from the source of the Big Bang, meaning it's going back in time while we are going forwards in time. It's a totally bizarre theory that was concocted by the Perimeter Institute for Theoretical Physics of Canada. Scientists here came up with the new cosmological model of the anti-universe. Scientists say the mirror universe would still play by the fundamental rules of physics, but there are a lot of details about this theory that haven't been fleshed out. Scientists think the existence of another universe could explain the existence of dark matter. Although dark matter is still theoretical and has never been measured, regardless, scientists say 85% of the matter in our universe is made of it. It's an invisible force that supposedly permeates every single part of our existence. Scientists think that dark matter could be made of subatomic particles that haven't even been discovered yet. But now we have to jump quickly to the Big Bang. This happened 14 billion years ago, and ever since the universe has been expanding. The Big Bang was, in essence, the creation of all existence. Particles, atoms, stars, and planets all burst into progressive creation starting on a subatomic level. Scientists are now saying that on the other side of the Big Bang is a symmetrical universe. They believe a singularity event where general relativity breaks down spawned two universes at the same time. one going forwards in time and the other going backwards. The other universe would look just like ours, only time is reversed. Something that feels a little impossible to even try and grasp. Number 6. Neanderthal Bacteria. Scientists have been doing some weird stuff with Neanderthal bacteria that was scraped off of fossilized teeth. A new study published in the journal Science describes how scientists have been using dental plaque from ancient human teeth to look at the evolution of mouth microbes. Researchers think these strange strains of bacteria could help to develop antibiotics and to help modern people stay healthy. What you might not know is that every single person has their own microbiome inside their mouth. There are hundreds of different microscopic organisms living on your tongue and in your gums right now. The microorganisms are different depending on where you live and what environment you grew up in. To investigate the oral microbiome of these ancient humans, Christina Warner from Harvard University started scraping ancient dental plaque. In other words, Neanderthal tartar. Surprisingly enough, Christina says the preserved tartar has the highest concentration of DNA on any part of an ancient skeleton. With only a few milligrams, Christina is able to isolate billions of DNA fragments. During the most recent study, Christina and her colleagues analyzed dental material from 12 Neanderthals, 34 archaic humans, and 18 more recent humans from the past 100,000 years. Then, they sequenced over 10 billion DNA fragments to identify 459 bacterial genomes. Amazingly, 75% of the bacterial genomes come from known mouth bacteria. The other 25%, however, are a complete mystery. The coolest part of the discovery is that the unknown bacterial genomes appear to be linked to known species of bacteria found in caves. Christina says the one thing all these ancient people had in common was that they appear to have been living in caves and drinking cave water. It's fascinating that scientists can find all this information out simply by looking at preserved tartar. Our mouths are a lot different than the mouths of our ancestors, primarily because we don't live in caves anymore. And now we brush our teeth. Number 5. Halley's Comet. In New Jersey, Susie Kopp from Hopewell Township was minding her own business when a rock came crashing through her roof. The rock came from outer space and burst through her shingles. The meteorite then bounced off the floor like a basketball and ricocheted off the ceiling before finally coming to a rest. The rock is big and black and might just be part of the most famous meteorite in the universe. Derek Pitts, the chief astronomer at Franklin Institute in Philadelphia, was the one who showed up to investigate the rock. He says the stone could be 5 billion years old and that it may have been part of the Eta Aquarids meteor shower that takes place in spring of every year. It's an annual event in which small particles ejected from Halley's Comet rain down on Earth. When Halley's Comet got close to the planet in 390 BC, it expelled a whole bunch of loose material. And every year, some of that material comes down to the surface of the planet in a brilliant meteor shower. As of right now, Halley's Comet is about as far from us as it gets. The last time it was visible to anyone with the naked eye was in 1986. It's not going to make a close pass again until 2061. But until then, Susie Kopp and her family have a giant piece of the comet, which they are keeping as a memento. It's one of the rarest rocks in the world, and it's lucky it didn't kill somebody when it smashed through the roof. What would you do if this happened to you? Let me know in the comments below. Number 4. The blinking fish. A new study claims there is an ugly fish that might hold the secret to animal evolution. The ugly fish is a mud skipper, the only fish in the world that can blink. It lives on land and in the water and appears to have evolved independently from our own extremely ancient ancestors. The concept is called convergent evolution. Scientists believe blinking as a bodily function evolved in the earliest animals that transitioned from life in the ocean to life on land 375 million years ago. So, it would make sense that studying the mud skipper would offer clues as to how our original evolution took place. But how did primitive fish first move onto the shore? The author of this study, Thomas Stewart from Penn State, says blinking evolved in soft tissues. This is an issue for archaeologists and paleontologists because soft tissue doesn't typically fossilize. But mud skippers are still alive and well, so studying them is like studying an ancient animal. Mud skippers typically live in tidal pools. They can amble across land on their awkward fins, and they blink like it's going out of style. By watching these animals, scientists found that they barely blink at all in the water, only when they're flopping around on land. The fish appears to blink specifically to remove debris from its eyes. Scientists also found that mud skippers blink a lot more when their eyes start to get dry. Even though the fish hasn't evolved tear glands or tear ducts, they blink to wet their eyes. This is done by mixing mucus from their skin with water from the swampy environment they live in. Now, scientists have found through their investigation that the first animals to evolve on land were likely very similar to mud skippers. However, blinking was only one trait that was needed to adapt, and for whatever reason, mud skippers never got the rest of the traits. All they've gotten so far is the blinking. Number 3. The Necropolis of Mare. Archaeologists in Egypt have made some shocking new discoveries at the Necropolis of Mare, which is located in the city of El Qusayya. They have found ancient buildings and a series of burials that date back to the Byzantine Empire. The Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities announced the discovery, saying the finds show just how important Mare was thousands of years ago. Archaeologists uncovered texts describing ancient deities on the walls of one building, scrawled in black Coptic script. They also found shelves made of mud and hay, where at one point manuscripts and other important items had been stored. The buildings were found in the upper cemetery, with the burials located in the lower section. One of the new burials belonged to a woman whose wooden coffin was badly damaged, and inside her coffin was a mask, some beads, a pair of copper mirrors, and some clay pots. The necropolis itself almost rivals Saqqara in its importance. It's way out in the middle of nowhere, about 40 miles from the city of Asyut. Between the 6th and 12th dynasties of ancient Egypt, it was used as a cemetery for provincial governors. These individuals were called nomarchs, and they were similar to modern state governors. Ancient Egypt contained 42 provinces, and each one had its own nomarch. But the cemetery was also used to bury mayors and priests. When you think of ancient Egypt, you typically think of pharaohs. But the truth is that they had a complex social hierarchy. The system of government was extraordinarily advanced for the time. They had the ruling king, the governor of the province, the high priest, and the mayors of every town. Those in middle management mostly wound up at Mare, buried in deep tombs beneath the desert sand. There is also a cemetery carved from the rocks of a cliff that the local residents of Qusay used as their own burial ground. Qusay was the nearest city to Mare and was a center of cultic worship for the Egyptian god Hathor. Number 2. Waterloo dentures. If you had to go to the dentist in 1815, you would have been in for a rough time. People in the 19th century had horrible teeth, with even the richest people having mouths full of rot. When all of the teeth rotted out of somebody's head, they usually made dentures from the teeth of dead people, or dentures of wood, ivory, and metal. That wasn't all people did for their mouths, though. The rich began trying to whiten their teeth by using acidic solutions to burn away the enamel. Also, everyone wanted to be a dentist. Jewelers, blacksmiths, and chemists were all dabbling in dentistry throughout the 18th and 19th centuries. The rise in sugary foods caused a worsening of our teeth, and people's faces started to rot. Around this time, the demand for false teeth grew and grew. An advertisement from 1792 in England even shows how early dentists offered money for anyone who could bring them human teeth, which they then used to create dentures. Researchers believe that after the Battle of Waterloo, greedy opportunists pillaged the battlefield for teeth. The battle was waged on June 18, 1815. The Duke of Wellington led the French army of Napoleon Bonaparte as part of the campaign to dominate Europe. A century before the Germans tried to do the same thing, the French tried it first, attempting to gain complete and total world domination. But the British, joined by their Prussian allies, smashed the French forces at Waterloo, ultimately ending the war. Researchers believe that after the Battle of Waterloo, greedy opportunists pillaged the battlefield for teeth. Rachel Bairstow, the curator of the British Dental Association's Teeth Museum in London, says scavengers pulled teeth from dead soldiers using pliers. There is even a collection of these teeth at the museum, as you can imagine. These sets were sold to dental technicians who boiled the teeth, cut off the ends, and then shaped them into solid ivory dentures joined by piano wire springs. Number 1. The Martian doorway. NASA has taken a photograph of an alien doorway on Mars. One of the most recent snapshots sent back to NASA from the Curiosity rover shows what appears to be a perfectly carved doorway in the red Martian landscape. The doorway is so convincing, it's hard not to immediately imagine a subterranean lair filled with tiny Martians. It really looks like a perfectly smooth entrance into the side of a mountain on the red planet. But what is it really? Experts say it's likely nothing more than a fracture, a strain in the rock that caused a piece to become dislodged. It's a good explanation, but it doesn't account for the perfect shape of the doorway. Nowhere else on Mars do we see perfectly rectangular portals leading into the side of a cliff. While it's not an unbreakable rule, nature doesn't typically work with straight angles. Although the doorway in the picture looks massive, big enough for a person to walk through without bumping their head, NASA says it's only a few inches tall. The picture is exaggerated, appearing far larger than it does in reality. Still, who's to say Martians have to be the same size as humans? It's perfectly reasonable to suppose any aliens on Mars could only be a few inches tall, like a bunch of alien dwarves or hobbits. What do you think Martians would look like if they really existed? Let me know in the comments below. Be sure to subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you next time. Bye!